Well, hello, Alec. You had an interesting story last week where you were looking at the state of walk-in clinics, medical clinics. What did you find?
Yes, it's something that we all, I think, have heard the anecdotal evidence of walk-in clinics seemingly moving to appointment only or closing or one of the other, especially here in Victoria. Like, I don't think I know there isn't a single walk-in clinic here in Victoria that isn't by appointment only. There's no ones that you can just walk right into. And so I wanted to look at that. And so I talked to the CEO of MetaMap, and I talked to a couple of doctors, and what they said was, yes, that's true. There's been a 30 to 50% drop in the number of walk-in clinics across BC over the past few years. And one of the main reasons for that, they say, is that the new payment model, which came out in February 2023 for family doctors, is great in some ways. It incentivizes family practice, which is great. We need more family doctors. At the same time, it disincentivizes family doctors working shifts or working at walk-in clinics because of the way the incentivization structure works now. Also, UPCCs have sort of come up as this replacement for walk-in clinics, but there's only a limited number of them across BC so far, and so they're saying, well, it's not an adequate replacement. You call and call and call, and you oftentimes have to wait in long lines or get on a wait list. It's not really the same ease of access as a walk-in clinic, even though most of us probably remember waiting for hours in a room while waiting for the doctor after going to a walk-in clinic. And so, there's no perfect model, but yeah, it's interesting to see that the anecdotal evidence is backed up by the numbers.
Right. And perhaps we shouldn't be surprised because there's a finite number of doctors, and if you move them from one area, like you say, from walk-in clinics to family doctor practices, something's got to give. And really, the only long-term solution, and it's probably a longer-term solution than most people would like, is more doctors.
Yes, and that's what Health Minister Josie Osborne says. She says she understands the issue raised by doctors such as Rita McCracken, who's a family physician and assistant professor at UBC. But it's hard because the rules around the colleges for getting doctors through the system, if they're trained overseas, or we only have so many spaces at UBC Medical School. We have the new one coming up at SFU, but that's going to take years before we see the first class graduate from SFU. And so Anna Kindy, the opposition critic for the Conservatives, says we need to expand the spaces further at UBC, but it's hard. There's only so much you can do to bring new doctors into the system. And then we saw that report from the BC College of Family Physicians recently, which showed that 40% of BC family doctors are considering either retiring or reducing their hours over the next 5 years. So it very much is a wicked problem in a lot of ways. And we're facing shortages of not only doctors, but nurses, nurse practitioners, healthcare workers across the field. And it's not something that you can solve overnight, but, kind of the decline of walk-in clinics is indicative of the type of balance that the province is trying to keep when it comes to primary care, but not always succeeding in that measure.
You also had a chance to sit down with Premier David Eby in the last few days. Here we are, a couple of months now removed almost from the provincial election. What did you hear from him? Anything different from what we heard on the campaign trail and immediately after the election?
I think the economy has become a big feature of discussion over the past month in a way that it was not on the campaign trail because of the reverberations from the election of Donald Trump in the U.S., the threat of 25% tariffs on all Canadian imports into the U.S., and that will affect the country greatly. I mean, BC is in a slightly better position. Only about half of our exports go to the U.S., but the Premier very much talked about the need for greater economic self-sufficiency to work within the country to reduce some of the trade barriers between provinces, which already create massive headaches for commerce and the economy. and hopefully reducing some of those trade barriers would create a buffer. Partially, it wouldn't. It might blunt the sharp edge, but it wouldn't, help us escape the full weight of the tariffs. But that's one way we could do. He also says that we need to work on, as he said previously, work on increasing security at the border, security at ports, bringing back port police, and so there's some of those measures that we can bring up to hopefully alleviate some of the concerns, as I talked about the last time we talked about some of the issues down in the U.S. that they're raising. But he also said that there's still. He also talked about clean energy, which is prescient given that today we're going to be hearing an update about the BC Hydro's call for clean power producers. And he said that there's still very much room for climate action in a world where you have Donald Trump as U.S. president, who talks about wanting to drill, and revive the oil and gas sector, revive natural gas. And he said that, there's still a place for it, even though BC has become a net importer of electricity over the past few years, when we're historically a net exporter, because we're having trouble meeting our own needs. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that works. But he's he acknowledges the issue, but is also confident that we can get to a point where we're meeting our energy needs and also helping to drive the future when it comes to climate action and clean energy. How that will happen has yet to be seen, given we're struggling to meet our own energy needs at the moment. But it'll be interesting to see today's announcement.
Definitely, yeah, we'll see that, and they have a very ambitious Clean BC plan, as you know, and a lot of that is contingent on finding clean energy sources and growing them, and also transitioning to electric vehicles, which at a significantly accelerated rate. I'd be interesting to see what happens there again with EV sales slumping a little bit in certain sectors. We saw the EV battery plant in Maple Ridge get paused precisely for
the E1 moly plant in Maple Ridge was paused, as the company says there's not enough demand for it, and that they're going to focus on the plants they already have open instead of looking at developing new ones until there becomes a market for it, which goes against what Premier Eby says about the demand for clean electricity. The world is electrifying, the world is shifting energy transition, and that may be true, but at the moment it's going through a bit of a slump, and so that's having economic impacts in BC with the pause of the E1 moly plant. We've also seen the Fortescue hydrogen facility be scrapped, as Eby is still a massive proponent of hydrogen, which but that's put a dent in that plan. And so it'll be interesting to see how, he balances the need for clean electricity with economic development, and whether we can actually develop some clean energy projects at a large scale. I know today is all about small power producers in a lot of ways, First Nations, independent contractors, people of that nature. But whether we can meet our energy needs and also possibly export it in the way that Eby envisions through Clean BC.
Right. Okay. Well, we're gonna everyone will hopefully disappear and get a little bit of a break over Christmas. When do you expect to see mandate letters for the new cabinet minister? Because we're still a long ways from the House sitting in February. But when are we going to start seeing what this next agenda looks like?
Hopefully early January. So we've heard January. I'm now hearing early January. I do not have a specific date. I don't think they have a specific date yet. And I think that will be very much something that we'll have to look forward to into the new year. I don't think we'll have much news on that front, unfortunately, over the next few weeks until January comes around. But it'll be quiet over the new year, especially given most ministers, I think, don't fully know what their priorities are yet. So especially for the new ministers who have new portfolios. And so it will be a very quiet Christmas in terms of BC politics, indeed, I feel like.
All right. Well, there's always something going on. So we'll check in with you again next week. But thanks for this, Alec.
Thank you so much, Harold.